Hello, welcome to Only for Your Ears, and today's episode 12, The Steadfast Tin Soldier, which I've renamed as The Dutiful Soldier Accepts His Fate but Offers His Heart. The structure will remain the same as usual. I'll start off with a short summary where I digress and highlight the most important points. Second, I'll do a critical review on how I believe the story plays out in today's society, with a couple of sentences to frame my review. And third, I'll talk about the trigger points. Now, the trigger points that affected me and that I saw running through the story. So let's begin with the dutiful soldier accepts his fate but offers his heart. The steadfast soldier of the title is one of 25 in a box. Unlike the other toy soldiers, however, he has only one leg, supposedly because there wasn't enough tin in the factory to fashion another leg. I digress. So the factory found it inconvenient to find a small piece of tin to complete the other half of his leg, therefore rendering him a disabled, discriminated as a toy. Nevertheless, the soldier is stoic or steadfast about the lack of a second leg. Among the other toys kept in the children's nursery is a paper castle containing a maiden, also made of paper. She's a ballet dancer who is standing on one leg performing a ballet pose. The soldier is drawn to her because he believes that she, like him, is lacking one leg. I digress, not so fast. I understand the soldier desperately wants to believe the ballet dancer has something in common with him. But deep down, he knows it's not really the truth. Though, how could something be imperfectly perfect, just like the tin soldier? Another toy is the Jack-in-a-Box, which opens up one night when the toys are all busy playing while the children of the house are sleeping. The goblin inside the Jack-in-a-Box spies the soldier looking longingly at the ballerina. I digress. So the goblin decides he likes the ballerina as soon as he sees the soldier looking at the ballerina and puts a monkey wrench in the situation to destroy his fantasy and curses him, telling him he will never regret looking at her like that. And the next day, presumably, because the goblin also loves the ballerina, I digress. You have to be so careful with jealousy because people can really destroy your relationships, if only for a while. Sure enough, the next day, the steadfast tin soldier is placed on a windowsill and a gust of wind blows him out into the street. I digress. This looks like the beginning of the soldier's demise, where he is picked up by some children who make a paper boat for him and set him into the water of the gutter. The soldier stoically accepts his fate as he is borne along by the water. I digress again. The soldier dutifully accepts his fate, having no idea the goblin has set his fate into a disastrous end, even when he passes or pays a toll to be allowed through. The gutter flows into a large canal, and the soldier realizes his boat is going to collapse and he will go under the water. I digress. I can imagine what next is on his downhill fate horizon. However, he was swallowed by a large fish, only to be only to be freed by the fish is cut open by some coincidence. The fish has been purchased by the family whose children owned the toy soldier. I digress. This reminds me of Jonah in the Bible, who was swallowed by a huge fish and stayed inside for protection until he vomited it out and went on to fulfill his biblical mission. Maybe the soldier has a mission too. The children retrieve the soldier, but shortly after, one of them picks him up and throws him into the fire. I digress. This is typical of privileged children, of a privileged child, I should say, without a care in the world. The paper ballerina is subject to the same fate. The soldier accepts his fate with stoic resignation, assuming the jealous goblin to be responsible for their unhappy fate among the flames. I digress. It's interesting how the jealous goblin didn't suffer the same fate as the soldier and ballerina, but it appears this was a karmic pairing to perish as two romantic souls. Soon all the remains of the steadfast tin soldier is his heart. I digress. The heart shows the soldier had something that the goblin obviously never had, leaving the goblin in the dust, which somehow avoided the flames. And all that's left, the ballerina's left of the ballerina is her spangled band, burnt black into a burnt black as coal. And that's the end of this story. Very, very short, but I think full of meaning and full of intense twists and turns, with jealousy and unrequited love, but a fateful karmic ending. Now, let's take a look at my critical review on how this story plays in society. This is a really heartfelt story about a dutiful and faithful disabled toy soldier who only has 1.5 legs. One day he sees a beautiful ballerina made of paper balancing on one leg and assumes she has a disability like him, and he falls in love with her. This roused the jealousy of the ugly goblin, who decides to put a curse on the tin soldier. By the end of the story, the goblin is gifted with the heart of the tin soldier, which is a hard lesson on how a curse will backfire. The soldier and the paper ballerina perish amongst the flames. And I believe this is a deep karmic lesson about manipulation and the evil deed, and that evil deeds don't work. In the end, there's a karmic retribution to be paid. The destiny of the toy soldier and the ballerina were meant to be together, and that is something the goblin can't deny. This story reminds me of some incredible acts of devotion. Here are some sentences to frame my review. Number 1, I digress again. The soldier dutifully accepts his fate, having no idea the goblin has set his fate into a disastrous end. This reminds me of the famous principal dancer of the English National Ballet Company, which was once called the Royal Ballet. Margot Fonteyn was a beautiful ballerina who got married late in life. She met Roberto Arias, a Panamanian politician who was unfortunately gunned down when he was campaigning. He was left paralyzed from the chest down. He had to receive around-the-clock attention while she continued performing. Although Roberto was paralyzed around the chest area, he couldn't speak to his wife either, or at all. She had to read his face to have a conversation with him. And while she was performing, she would rush home after her performance, and word got out about Margot Fonteyn never complained about her situation. She never once complained. She loved him so much. She looked after him. She spoke to him. She read his face. They had conversations with each other, a communication, an unspoken communication. And she devoted her whole life to him and dancing. And the word got out that Margot never complained about her situation. My feeling is that she loved him so completely that his paralysis deepened their love for each other. Although it most definitely changed the relationship logistically. I their, their I think their relationship may have been like the soulmate or a twin flame connection. I believe the paper ballerina would have loved the vulnerable but disabled soldier the same way. Margot Fontaine did with her beloved Panama politician, Roberta Arias, with all her heart. The second one, the gutter flows into a large canal, and the soldier realizes his boat is going to collapse and he will go under the water. I digress. I can imagine what next is on his downhill fateful horizon. In My Left Foot, the wonderful biographical story and film about Christy Brown, the Irish writer and painter who had severe cerebral palsy and was born into a working class family in Ireland. He had many siblings, but mainly stayed with his mother out of protection and understanding, I guess. He was a natural born artist who wrote a collection of writings, which was all executed by his left foot and toes on the typewriter. There was a film made about My Left Foot too, not just the regular story in a book, but an actual film where Daniel Day-Lewis played the lead and won an Oscar for Best Actor. His father had somewhat an indifferent attitude towards him, but it wasn't till his mother fell down the stairs one day that his father felt differently after it was Christy. And Christy was the only one at home who alerted the neighbors, that helped the mother and maybe saved the baby she was carrying. His father never thought Christy would amount to anything much, but oh, how his perception changed when he proved to be very useful in the end. In the film My Left Foot, he proves to be quite accurate, except for his love life. The film depicts him as a straightforward, blunt man who captures his nurse's heart with his charisma, where they get married and they have a solid life together. Not so fast. In reality, his love life carried the same theme of a Greek tragedy. His first wife he met, or it wasn't a wife actually, it was a friend, a very good friend. They were lovers. He first met Beth Moore, an American woman, a married woman who met Christie in 1960 in the United States and was a devout fan of his literature, and they continued to correspond. She was also instrumental in helping him finish his famous book, Magnus Opus. He made a great deal of money by by spreading the proceeds and moved into a constructed house with his sister in Ireland. He made a lot of money, but he used the money wisely, and I'm sure Beth Moore received quite a hefty handful. Around this time, he ended his relationship with Moore, who had confessed her love for him to her husband, who she planned to divorce. But it was too late. He decided to go with this new woman, Mary Carr, who was English, and he married her. He died around 49 years old, and when his body was examined, there were suspicious bruises found on his body. Mary Carr was suspected of abusing him, but it didn't go farther than that. This was a sad situation, sad and tragic ending to his life. Beth Moore truly loved him in spite of his severe cerebral palsy, and he foolishly allowed himself to be smitten by a bitter woman who happened to have deep issues with men and turned out to be a lesbian. She took advantage of his vulnerability and disability, but was portrayed as the loving wife. And it was really Beth Moore that was truly devoted to him. It's unfortunately, when you're that disabled, it's so easy for someone that has nefarious or a way of thinking to come in and take advantage of them. They know exactly how to speak to them and make them feel wonderful at first. And once they get that ring on their finger and the commitment, things change. That was the second one. Now the third one is, I digress, not so fast. I understand the soldier desperately wants to believe the ballet dancer has something in common with him, but deep down he knows it's not really true though. How could something so imperfectly perfect, just like the tin, be just like the tin soldier? Stephen Hawking was the world's most famous physicist who discovered the distance between Mars and Earth. He was diagnosed between the ages of 17 to 21 with Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a degenerative progressive breakdown of the muscles. Soon afterwards, he married his first wife, Jane Hawkins, because they both believed that he wouldn't live long. He was supposed to only live maybe a couple of years. So they went on to have 3 children who prevailed their separation in 1990. You can imagine being married to a brilliant man and a sizable ego must have been challenging. Jane Hawkins reportedly said it was difficult being married to a man who you have to say, you're a really brilliant man. You're a really brilliant man. You're so clever, and worship the ground that they walk on. While at the same time, this woman probably had her own dreams. And it was noted in the film that, which people didn't know until the film, that he beat his wife. In theory, she didn't want to give up the rest of her life to him. Nobody does. But sometimes when you're in these situations, you do. However, Margot Fontaine, she never gave up her career. She continued dancing, even though I think she died just around the same time as her husband or before. There were loads of carers coming into the house, and everything got very confusing to attend to him, and it was intrusive. At this time, he formed a deep relationship with a woman that soon became his second wife, a nurse. After his wife divorced him, he had a dramatic personal life, but someone who had so many physical incapacities. He married his second wife, Eileen, in 1994. He was reported, it was reported after his death that his children felt his second wife, Eileen, bullied him. This could have been a karmic retribution for Stephen, who supposedly beat his wife. Jane, I must admit, I noticed an interesting anecdote when he received the Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama. The president asked if he could push his head forward as he was having difficulties putting the medal around his neck. And Eileen said, "Oh, yes, you can push it forward." And she actually pushed his forward quite aggressively and said, "Oh, just do what you want. It's okay." Stephen Hawkins died in 2014. So here you have the three stories that helped to frame my review, and all of them true stories. Now let's move on to the trigger points. Now the trigger points, now triggers are the situations, for example, that you have an experience way back at the beginning of your life or earlier on in your life, and it's abusive and there's lots of trauma and turmoil. And when you heal, you feel as though you've recovered and you're fine. And you probably have recovered and you're okay. But somewhere along the line, a situation that you had forgotten about triggers you. And most people get into a panic and feel as though they have not progressed, that because they've been triggered, they haven't healed, and they go back to being where they were at the very beginning. But with triggers, if you realize and you know what a trigger is, you know it's just as a reminder that, okay, this is something just to remind you of where you were, and now you can move forward and continue your healing. So it's nothing to be afraid of. But most people are afraid of triggers until they realize what triggers are and that they can overcome them. So the trigger points. Let's take a look at the trigger points that irritated or got to me. I digress. It's interesting how the jealous goblin didn't suffer the same fate as the soldier and ballerina, but it appears this was a karmic pairing to perish as two romantic souls. Talking about third-party situations and how people have tried to sabotage relationships and put me in the middle of it. It's happened so many times, people, I can't tell you. I had a situation quite recently with someone that wanted to pull me into a third-party situation. I wouldn't allow it. I stayed on the outside while him and his partner were left empty-handed. He couldn't play with me. What was interesting, it was the situation reminded me so much of Dangerous Liaisons, an absolutely brilliant film with Glenn Close as the Avenger and John Malkovich, the lover and the person who helps her avenge all these people and to take revenge on all these people. Uma Thurman is in the film, and so is Michelle Pfeiffer. And it's really interesting. John Malkovich goes around sleeping with these women and goes out of his way to destroy their reputation, a bit like this person that wanted to try and destroy my reputation, thinking that I was just some needy older woman that would just say yes to anything, that it was okay. and that I was so blind and stupid and naive, I wouldn't know what was going on until the dagger went through my heart and he walked away feeling superior and happy. This is the kind of game that they were playing. But what happened was, like in Dangerous Liaisons, is that the player ended up being played. In Dangerous Liaisons, what happens is that John Malkovich is ordered to pursue Michelle Pfeiffer. So he laughs. He goes, "Oh, this is too good to be true. This is going to be fantastic." She's a God-fearing woman. She's a widow, God-fearing woman, and very, very pure. Well, he starts to pursue her, and my, to his surprise, he realizes that she actually has a personality. She's a real person and with a real soul, and that she's quite pure. The same thing almost happened, with kind of similar, happened to this person that came into my life, who I really quite respected and liked. I considered him a friend. And what happened? He decided that he wanted to blow up the relationship and, I guess, play some kind of a game. Or what happened is that he caught feelings, which he most undoubtedly never expected. And it's the same. It kind of mirrors this Dangerous Liaison. John Malkovich never, in his wildest dreams, thought he was going to fall for or fall in love or catch feelings for Michelle Pfeiffer. And what happens in the actual film is that Michelle Pfeiffer's character doesn't want to see him anymore. The last encounter they have, he says, "My cruelty towards you is beyond my control. I have to do this." Well, he had to do it, follow through, because he wanted to keep Glenn Close's character happy. All the while, he was miserable treating Michelle Pfeiffer's character the way that he did. So he leaves and he never comes back. And what happens is Michelle Pfeiffer gets sick and she's very, very depressed and she doesn't want to speak to anybody. And John Malkovich, he's sick. He's completely broken-hearted. Can you imagine? She was supposed to be a toy, a game, just like I was supposed to be a toy in a game. And this person caught feelings. This is the worst thing, people, to be a player and to play Russian roulette with people's emotions only to be played by yourself and you end up catching feelings. In the end, he was so distraught about how he'd been and how many lives he had destroyed. There was somebody that was really angry at him because he loved Michelle Pfeiffer's character and he had a gun and he wanted to shoot John Malkovich. And John Malkovich turned around and faced him and he basically told him to kill him, which he did. He just shot him and left him dead on the floor. And then it switches to Michelle Pfeiffer, who finds out that John Malkovich is dead. And she asks the maid to just pull the curtains. And they die. They both die. They have this fate, just like the dutiful tin soldier and the ballerina are burned and perished in the flames, except for the love, except for his heart. So it was interesting. When you play a game of Russian roulette like that, you end up getting burnt. But the love and those feelings still prevail. And from what I heard, the partner was none too pleased, was absolutely none too pleased in real life, in my situation, none too pleased, because it was a game. I was just a toy, like, supposedly, the dutiful soldier that met his fate but offered his heart. The next trigger, and now how, before I go into the next trigger, how I've dealt with that situation is that I realized, checkmate. You wanted to play me for a fool. You wanted to play me as an old woman, that I'd be just so desperate for love. But you didn't realize this old woman has self-love, has self-respect. You didn't realize that you were going to catch feelings for this very person that you were choosing to use like a useless toy. So I've been able to get past that to a certain degree, because I realize it's the self-love that I have for who I am as a person that really helped me overcome this particular trigger. The next one is, I digress. It's interesting how a jealous goblin didn't suffer the same fate as the soldier and ballerina, but it appears to be a karmic pairing and the perish of two romantic souls. Oh, this is again, it's talking about the first one as well. But this is really talking about Lady Diana Spencer and Camilla and Prince Charles. What's interesting is that I had no idea that Camilla was one of these type is one of these type of women. She is like the goblin. If she sees that you like somebody that she likes or is about to like, she immediately, sort of tells you, get out of the way. This guy's mine. This guy's for me. Which is exactly what she did with Diana. But what she didn't know is that she played Diana for a fool, and in the end, Diana ended up playing her. What happened is that, yes, it was a very toxic relationship the three of them had. And of course, Diana, in actual fact, was the third party, because you had Charles. Even though Charles and Diana were married, Charles was really committed to Camilla, but not so fast, because Charles really wasn't committed to Priscilla. He wasn't committed to to Camilla at all. He's known for having several women, several affairs. All this time saying, oh, it's Camilla. Camilla's my love. Camilla is somebody that he stood purposely behind to hide the real person of who he is. And that is just basically an old-fashioned word I use, a Casanova, a player, somebody that goes from different women to different women. Diana knew who he was like, other women knew who he was like, and Camilla knew who he was like, knew what he was like. But she wanted the control. And in the end, she never got the control. She did this. She got married before Charles did, and she got married to a man that Princess Anne was going out with, and she liked. And she did everything she could to just say, no, get out the way. This is who I want. And she got married to him. No, full well, she didn't really love him the same way that she loved Charles. So I consider the situation with Camilla. She may be the queen. She may have all the titles, But in the end, she never had this man's heart the way it was presented to the public, because he was playing with so many other women. He pledged his commitment to her, but he did not pledge his heart to her. His heart is a wandering heart. Now, how did this affect me? Well, it just reminded me of, pardon me, my family. My family, my father, my dad needing to go away and have an affair. But with my father, he stayed committed to one woman, and he wasn't known for flirting or going out or trying to have different women. I didn't know anything about this, but he just, word always gets out. If you are like that by nature, it always gets out. And he proved to me in the end that he did not want to stay married to my mother, but just because he didn't want to stay married to my mother and he married somebody else, it does not mean that he's a player, that he's disloyal, and that he did not have the capacity to love. The fact that he was able to stay married to this woman for 30 years and create a new family and have who's my half brother proved to me that he's not even remotely like a King Charles is today. Quite different. And plus, I've matured, I've grown. I feel the love of myself every day, or almost every day. And that's so much more fulfilling than settling for somebody that you can say, oh, he's my boyfriend, but there's no true love there. And the last one, I digress. The heart shows the soldier had something that the goblin obviously never had, leaving the goblin in the dust, which somehow avoided the flames, and all that's left is the ballerina and her spangled, burnt black as coal. Well, jealousy, as I said, jealousy is a very interesting thing. Jealousy is a tricky thing, to be quite honest. I have experienced jealousy all my life, starting off in my family and with friends. If you're a different type of person, a type of person that doesn't really fit in, you are going to meet people that have all types of feelings of jealousy. I can use an example. I'm living somewhere else at the moment. I was living in Spain and I've moved out to somewhere else, and I've been doing quite a lot of volunteer work. And I've been very, very productive and very resourceful, even though I don't really have what you call finances. And I've been volunteering teaching English because that was my second career. And I've noticed that people around me got noses felt out of joint because they could see that I was developing, I was surviving, I was really improving, I was getting into poetry, I'm doing my podcast. And while this was going on, I could tell that there were certain people in superior positions that were just getting irritated with me. I could tell that the jealousy was there. And what happened one day is that I think I must have been working too hard and didn't realize that I was as sick as I was, and I got Bell palsy. And The second day after I was diagnosed with Bell palsy, my face was quite distorted. And a friend of this person that was in a senior position at this place looked at me and gave me one of those, how can I say it? It's like a sort of a laugh, but as if to say, oh, don't you look terrible? Don't you look ugly? And I found myself thinking, is that all you got? I said, thank goodness I wasn't a model. Thank goodness I wasn't a model and somebody that needs to depend on their looks, even though I'm not a bad looking woman. And I found myself thinking, jealous people, insecure, jealous, mean people that feel threatened, but are not willing to invest the type of work that you are willing to invest to get the job done, I find to be pitiful. And when she did that, as if to say, oh, look at you, how funny that is. I just felt sad for her. I didn't feel upset. I didn't feel like triggered, really triggered, because I realized what was going on. I said, it's not really about me. It's about her insecurity. That she isn't really, even though she's left the company now, and got another job. Good for her. But she really, while she was there, I get the feeling that she wasn't happy doing what she was doing. And I say again, last but not least, jealous people are usually very insecure and very unhappy. So on realizing that, when we realize that, instead of wishing them a bad omen, which they definitely do deserve sometimes when they do hateful, nasty, sabotaging things. If you can get to the place where you have a little bit of self-love and self-light for yourself, just wish them love. Just do what the dutiful soldier, tin soldier, did. Accepted his fate, but in the end, he offered his heart, which was full of love. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And thank you to everybody that's out there. Thank you to the people that have come by and made an effort to listen. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say, please make an effort to leave a comment, or to press the like button, or to subscribe. It really helps with the algorithms, to send me a little bit of love. I really appreciate that. And I just finish off with my usual phrase: healing is a lifelong gift, lesson, and blessing we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong blessing, lesson, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Goodbye, and thank you.